The past is full of echoes, but some are quieter than others. On What You Didn't Hear, we bring those echoes back to life, one forgotten day at a time. So settle in as we take a deep dive into the history behind the U.S.'s greatest national holiday, Thanksgiving. The first national Thanksgiving was proclaimed by President George Washington on Thursday, November 26, 1789, after a resolution from the First Federal Congress. While earlier harvest celebrations like the one in 1621 are often associated with the holiday, Washington's 1789 proclamation was the first time a day of thanks was set aside for the entire nation under the new Constitution. In 1621, the Pilgrims at Plymouth Colony and the Wampanoag people held a harvest feast sometime between September and mid-November. But this was not a national holiday, and the term Thanksgiving was not used at the time. 1789, the first national Thanksgiving took place on November 26, after George Washington issued a proclamation in response to the recommendation for the First Federal Congress. In 1863, Abraham Lincoln would declare Thanksgiving a national holiday to be celebrated annually on the last Thursday of every November. In 1941, Congress passed a resolution, signed into law by FDR, officially declaring Thanksgiving to be celebrated on the fourth Thursday in November. But this is the mainstream history of the U.S. holiday and doesn't account for the less-known traditions and practices that have taken place on Thanksgiving. For instance, Thanksgiving masking. What was Thanksgiving masking? Let's begin with what it looked like. In cities like New York in the late 1800s and early 1900s, on Thanksgiving Day you would see children dressed in ragged adult clothes, wearing masks or smeared faces, carrying out through the streets, asking at doors, anything for Thanksgiving? They might get apples, pennies, or candy. One archive example: on November 26, 1911, children ran rampant through Manhattan. Some wore garish masks modeled after George Washington and Uncle Sam. Others smudged their cheeks and donned rags to look like hobos. The practice went by names like Thanksgiving masking or the Ragamuffin Parade. The phrase ragamuffin captured the spirit, children dressing up as poor beggars, sometimes performing a trick and sometimes begging for treats. So while today we associate costumes and candy with Halloween, in that era, Thanksgiving had its own version of masked mischief. Why did this tradition arise? Several overlapping lines of history intersect. First, the idea of masking and costume begging has long roots in European folk traditions. Groups would go door to door in disguise, perform small shows, or simply ask for food and coin, especially around harvest time or winter festivals. In the U.S., in the 19th century, especially in large immigrant-populated cities, Thanksgiving was becoming nationally celebrated after Abraham Lincoln proclaimed a national Thanksgiving in 1863. Children in dense neighborhoods found space and freedom on that holiday to roam. The ragamuffin aspect: children would dress as hobos in tattered clothes or cross-dress and wear exaggerated masks, both as play and parody of poverty and social role reversal. For example, one writer on Thanksgiving masking said, "Boys frequently wore girls' clothing, spending their afternoons gamboling in awkward mimicry of their sisters." The custom also had an economic element. After the harvest and before cold winter, there was more food, and socially sanctioned ways to redistribute small amounts to children or the needy were culturally acceptable. Thus, Thanksgiving masking can be seen as part carnival, part ritual redistribution, and parts children's misrule. It could be rowdy. One article said thousands upon thousands of children kept in the open air for hours, blasting horns, riding horses, and generally enjoying themselves to the limit of their temporary freedom. The custom extended into early 20th century, But in many places it faded out mid-20th century as Halloween took over and city authorities discouraged the disorder. As Halloween became more commercialized and expanded, the niche of Thanksgiving costume begging diminished. One scholar argues that Thanksgiving masking was a missing link between older European masked begging and modern trick-or-treat. During the Great Depression, the idea of children masquerading as poor beggars seemed less appropriate, when actual poverty was widespread. Newspaper pieces in the 1930s and 1940s began to criticize the custom. As cities grew, controlling the street mischief and children roaming became more important. The rise of organized events, like the Macy's Day Thanksgiving Parade, starting in 1924, gave a more official face to Thanksgiving. Though the custom faded, it helped shape the idea of children costumed and visiting neighbors for treats, a concept that would flourish at Halloween. So Thanksgiving masking quietly influenced one of the most popular traditions we see today. Also, it reminds us that our holiday practices are not static. They shift, they fade, and they get replaced, or get absorbed into other celebrations. That's all I have on this brief, special episode of What You Didn't Hear About Thanksgiving. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving day filled with great food and family or friends. As always, thank you for listening. If you would like to help my podcast grow, please leave a review on whatever podcast platform you're listening on and share with your history buff friends and family. Thank you for joining, and until next time, this is What You Didn't Hear. Happy Thanksgiving. Into the deep dive. It's time for a deeper dive. Dive deep into the deep.